All right, so today we're going to do something a little different. We're diving into a blog post, of all things, about renting a margarita machine for a bachelor party. But we're not just talking party tips. We're going to treat this as a fantastic case study in persuasion and marketing. It's all about how you can take something that seems kind of simple and position it as an absolutely essential, legendary experience. Let's get into it.
So, the entire argument kicks off right here with this quote. It immediately raises the emotional stakes. See, by framing the event not as just some party, but as a once-in-a-lifetime celebration, the whole conversation changes. You're now primed to think about investing in the experience, not just trying to save a buck. It's a really powerful emotional anchor to start with.
So that begs the question, right? What's the secret ingredient? What makes something truly legendary? Is it the big, flashy, expensive stuff? Or is it something else? The core idea in this piece is that the key to a legendary event isn't in the obvious things, but in these small, carefully chosen details that completely change the entire vibe.
Okay, so let's actually break this down. Let's deconstruct the anatomy of what this article calls the perfect upgrade. We're going to follow the logic here step by step and see how a really compelling case gets built, layer by layer, basically turning something you might want into something you feel you absolutely need.
And just to be super clear, the goal of this explainer isn't really about party planning. It's about analyzing the strategy behind creating premium value. We're looking at how the right arguments, presented in just the right order, can position a product as completely indispensable.
So the very first play in this persuasive playbook is all about establishing a massive quality gap. The argument immediately goes after the most obvious DIY alternative, the blender you have at home. And the goal is to make it seem totally, completely inadequate in comparison. Now, this is where it gets really interesting, how they define that quality gap. It's not just better, it's a fundamentally different process. A home blender, right, it just crushes ice. That's why you get that icy, kind of watered-down result. But the machine, it freezes the mixture itself. And that's how you get that perfectly smooth texture, the kind you get at a fancy resort. The language here is so clever. One is amateur, hit or miss, while the other is professional, consistent every single time. And the quality argument doesn't just stop with the hardware. Nope. It goes right to the ingredients. The source material draws this really sharp line between those cheap mixes with high fructose corn syrup and their premium stuff made with real cane sugar. They even explain why it matters, how cold tends to dull sweetness, and how cane sugar gives you a clean and balanced taste that actually highlights the other flavors instead of that artificial taste that just kind of dulls everything.
Okay, so they've got you on quality. You're convinced it's better. But now comes the pivot, and honestly, it's a brilliant one. The argument shifts to tackle the biggest objection you probably have, the cost. And it does this by reframing the whole thing, not as an expense, but as a surprisingly smart financial move. I mean, your first thought, and mine too, probably, is this. Renting a whole machine, that's gotta be expensive, right? The article anticipates this perfectly. It acknowledges it right up front and then uses that skepticism as the perfect setup for a big reveal. It's a classic way to disarm your audience's objections before they even have a chance to take root. And this is such a key move. It's all about establishing a baseline for comparison. So the first step in their economic argument is to anchor your perception of cost to this number, $10 or more for one drink at a bar. That number now becomes the benchmark that everything else is going to be measured against. And boom, this is where the whole economic case just clicks into place. When you break it down for a whole group over a full weekend, the math completely flips. You're not paying that massive bar markup on every single drink. You're just buying your own bottles at retail price. The cost per drink just plummets. All of a sudden, the luxury item is actually reframed as the financially smart choice. It's pretty genius. Okay, so we've covered quality and we've covered cost. But the argument goes even deeper. It shifts from the practical stuff to the experiential. The next pillar here is convenience, or as you might call it, removing all the friction from the event. I mean, look how simple this is. This really drives home that idea of a frictionless experience. The contrast is unspoken, but it's so powerful, right? There's no stopping the conversation to get out a blender, no messy cleanup, no waiting 20 minutes for a drink at some crowded bar. It's all about maximizing the time you have for what the party is actually supposed to be about, hanging out. And this is the real emotional payoff of that convenience. That private bar feeling. It's not just about having drinks readily available. It's about a sense of status, of exclusivity, of being an effortless host. It lets everyone, including the person who planned the whole thing, just relax and actually be present in the moment. All right, this brings us to the final and honestly probably the most powerful part of the whole argument. We've moved from the tangible things like quality and cost to the emotional benefit of convenience. And now we get to the ultimate social payoff, positioning this machine as a catalyst for human connection.
And here it is, the ultimate payoff. The machine isn't sold as a drink dispenser, it's sold as a social hub. It's like the modern-day campfire. Sure, it adds a high-end touch, but more importantly, it becomes a natural gathering point. It's a reason for people to come together, to chat, to interact, and to create these shared memories. And that transforms it from just a utility into the actual centerpiece of the whole event.
And this just brings everything full circle, doesn't it? This final quote ties all those arguments together perfectly. It connects right back to the beginning, to those high emotional stakes of a once-in-a-lifetime weekend. The phrase, "the real deal," reminds you of the quality arguments, and "worth it" echoes that whole value proposition. It's the perfect closing statement, a real mic drop.
So, when you take a step back from this case study, it poses a pretty fascinating question for all of us. The strategy here was never really about selling a machine, it was about selling a better experience, one that was built on quality, value, convenience, and connection. It really makes you think, what are the small, strategic upgrades in our own work or our own lives that could have that same kind of huge, outsized impact? What's our margarita machine?